Hi, I'm Simon Hartley.
And I'm Helen Martin.
Welcome back to Pep Talks. This is one of our little Friday fireside chats between Helen and I, where we pick up on the really pertinent key issues that we've seen over the past couple of weeks. And Helen, I know this is one that you've seen as well. Mood, positivity, and energy are critical, particularly for leaders, isn't it?
Yes, yeah, for sure. I think I've mentioned this a couple of times, or anyone who knows me knows I speak about Shackleton quite a bit. But one of the things he said was that how he showed up every day and what kind of energy he gave up and how he carried himself had a huge impact on his team. And I think we've got to remember this at this time. We've had an unpredicted ruin your month, quarter, year nightmare thrown at us. But we need to fall back to simple priorities. And one of those is keeping the energy and keeping the communication and keeping the fabric of our business together. So they're the sort of things this week that we've seen people struggle with, including myself. People are struggling with that now.
Yeah, absolutely. It's something that I've been working with leaders a lot on over the last couple of weeks because innately they know that they need to stay positive. They know they
Yeah.
need to keep their energy and mood, but it's difficult to do sometimes. I think
Mm.
one of those principles that I picked up from, I don't know, have you ever read Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl?
No, but I will.
It's probably the only book that I'd say to people, this is one that I would recommend to every human being on the planet. Just take it, read it, absorb it. It's a fantastic book. And he talks about the ability to choose how we think and feel, even under incredible circumstances. And he was a prisoner in Auschwitz. So, I mean, we think this is tough, but I'm sure Auschwitz was a damn sight tougher than
Yeah.
this. And he said, that's the bit that nobody can take from you, your ability to choose the way you think and feel.
Mm.
So innately people, I think, understand that, but it's difficult to do if we don't have great mood, positivity and energy. So I mean, I talk to people a lot about managing what goes on between your ears, and choosing that way to think and feel. But I also say that there are 6 pillars that we can build underneath it to help us have greater mood, positivity and energy so that it's easier to manage what goes on between our ears. And these pillars, I think, are pretty fundamental. From my point of view, one of those absolutely critical ones is to start with meaning and purpose, to make sure we've got really strong meaning and purpose. Because I think one of those challenges that you might see in some of the furloughed people that you've got is that being occupied is not enough. Just being busy and doing stuff is not enough, particularly for high achieving people. So this week, one of the trends I've seen this week is that some senior executives have actually been made furloughed. So a CFO, chief operating officer, senior board members are starting to become furloughed. From their point of view, decorating the house, tidying some drawers, stuff like that, it might occupy them for a couple of days, but after that, they're going to need more.
Mm.
And meaning and purpose is absolutely critical. On a sort of macro level, we need to know that what we're doing has importance, that it is purposeful. But even on a task by task basis, we've got to understand that the stuff that we're doing is genuinely meaningful and purposeful and is taking us towards, in the direction that we want to go, is contributing to where we want to go. So,
Yeah.
so for me, it's an enormously strong pillar.
Yeah, I watched a webinar and just discussing, and probably for those people, leadership in a crisis, and it spoke about being artful, which
Mm,
stands for the art, and it stands for um, having adaptive capacity, resilience, and trust. And I think they're 3 things really when you're talking about that are really powerful
yeah,
actually, because we've got to change and we have to think creatively and we have to kind of think what to do, and we will come back out of this. So we have got to use this time wisely. But the resilience is really around your energy and your brain power, and releasing some of that so that you can be open to doing things differently and looking at it. And the trust element of it, I think, is just getting to terms with connecting. I mean, I think in the beginning we had to come to terms with the situation, which we've done. But as you say, it's changing all the time,
yeah.
and we had to come to terms with connectivity with our teams, with our leadership teams, and with our teams that report to us, and that we've come to terms with. But the next part of this is kind of what you're speaking about, what to do. What do we do next? You know, how do we look at this and look beyond that crisis so we're ready when we come out of it? And I think that's what we need to do.
Yeah.
Lead from, I think we spoke this week to Anne Daniels, but, you know, she spoke about leading from above, below, and in the middle, which is kind of different times. You have to keep switching that to where you need to be depending on what the issue is. But we've got to be ready, and we have to look beyond this crisis. And I think we're absorbing so much media, you know, that everything will be different. We keep talking about this, everything will be different afterwards. And in some ways, of course, there are going to be differences. Telemedicine is one that we see, and even in pharmacies now. I was reading about a guy in New York who had created this you know, way of buying your medicines online, and they're delivered to your workplace or your home. And that's here to stay, I believe. That was always in the pipeline, and it's moved quicker. Universities, you know, how are they going to cope? Because with online training, we see that now people are asking for that. If this continues September, do you get your money back? Blah, blah, blah. How does that work? And then I guess the other aspect of it is remote working. For some people, we're talking about that will become the default. You know, and they will like that, but that won't be for everybody either. And I think we will have a mix. And e-commerce platforms, I mean, that is a huge area that we should all be looking at, because that will make immediate and lasting gains for your company. And, you know, I think from remote working and e-commerce, there's just greater flexibility in how you perform your role and what you do, you know. And I think they're the things that people, even if they are furloughed, they could be looking at or exploring. And I think that would be really helpful, just to have a good understanding, because they're not things that we typically are experts in.
No, absolutely. And the ability to look for those things and to keep going, even though you might get knocked, stuff that you try doesn't work, all the rest of it. I call resilience that bounce back ability. And there's another part of mental toughness, tenacity, which is your ability to just keep going. Yes. Even when you're exhausted and you don't want to, and it's tough, you do just keep going. And both of those really come back to, from my experience, they come back to two questions. Why are you doing it, and how much do you want it? I learned this actually when I did a daft challenge a couple of years ago to walk 100 miles in 24 hours. And the reason I did it was to encounter what I call the quit point, that point where you are tempted just to give up, because it's just too much, it's just too tough, it's too painful. And I learned that when you get to that quit point, you have to answer those two questions. Why am I doing this, and how much do I want it? How important is this to me? And if you can answer both positively, you get through to the other side. And it's as you get through to the other side that your brain switches gears. And instead of wishing that the challenge was not there, wishing that the pain was not there, your brain flips into, so how could I do this then? So literally in my challenge, on one side of it, I'm thinking, why on earth am I doing this? Am I some kind of sadist? This is stupid. I mean, why am I in all this pain? I could just give up and go home. And my brain was justifying all the reasons why it would be okay to quit. And as soon as I got through to the other side and accepted it, my brain then started asking, how do I get rid of the pain then? What would I have to do? And now it's in solution mode. But so why is that critical question, which comes back to meaning and purpose? That's why this pillar's absolutely critical. The second one that I think is really helpful for people right now, the second pillar of mental emotional health, is what I call reality. It's the ability to understand what is real and what's not, and to focus on what's real. Because the truth is that fear is not real usually, it's imaginary. I actually learned this on that daft 100-mile walk, because the fact that it's 24 hours long means you have to walk through the dark. So I was walking across open countryside at like 1 o'clock in the morning, and I could hear noises around me, and they're actually probably rabbits or hares or something, but you can imagine what my mind was doing, can't you? My mind was putting meaning to these noises, and instead of a rabbit, you know, I was imagining it was a wolf with red eyes or a zombie or something. And I started to understand actually that the fear is a fear of my imagination. And actually, the bit that people are scared of right now is what might happen. So we project forward and imagine a future, and we paint this picture of an apocalypse, and we're scared that might happen. So we're actually scared of our imagination. Anything that's in the future has to be our imagination, because there's no other way of experiencing the future. So that's the thing we get scared about. So if we understand that, we come back to reality and we ask, okay, what's right in front of me? What's real? What can I do about it? Instead of worrying about the future, which is our imagination, we start focusing on what we can control and focusing on the present. And for most people, that really helps their energy, mood, etc. Puts them in a far better place to tackle the challenge that's actually in front of them.
Yeah. And I think that's the thing, actually. We have to see things as they are, not worse. Because, otherwise we're bringing the same emotion as everyone else. The media, everything we're reading, that, what's going to happen. They don't know really what's going to happen. They're all watching, and making some assumptions on that. But we have got to make sure that we manage that and manage it carefully. We have to be realistic in it. But if we are bringing the same emotion as everyone else, then you can't lead. You can't lead in that, because that's fear, actually. And fear is not going to bring you to the other side. I mean, everybody is in the same situation here. We don't know which way we're going. So we don't know which way to go or which way to turn. But actually, it doesn't really matter as long as we have a plan and a strategy. And maybe a plan B, actually, which we've had to use. But we were also talking about that emergency room triage, and to use that in business. And that has been spoken about many times. But, to assess the situation and prioritize, what is going to make a difference now, and not something that can be put off. That's what they do. They prioritize and deal with what they need to deal with now. And then a decision for the next part of that treatment or whatever is pushed out. And I think that's really important. There are some balls that we cannot drop, and we know that. We have got to come out of this with a business, and a strong business that can be built upon very quickly. But there are other balls that, we can park for the moment and come back to. And I think that is exactly the resilience that we need and the energy that we need to. So, I mean, looking at things as realistically and as the facts are really good, but actually looking at things and, becoming laden down with the fear and is not a way forward, and it's not leading.
Yeah. And I mean, going back to the conversation we had with Justin Hughes, aviate, navigate, communicate is their triage. Essentially, it's just keep the plane in the air first of all. Don't worry about the other stuff. Keep the plane in the air first of all. Once we've done that, then we can do something else. The other thing that I've noticed lots of people getting wrapped up is that they're very uncomfortable with uncertainty. They want to know, they want to be able to predict the future. Well, honestly, we can't. I mean, we can't anyway. Particularly, we can't now. But I mean, I've been talking to lots of leaders about certainty being an illusion, really. And we kind of want an idea of certainty. It's a bit like a mental comfort blanket from my point of view. And if we're searching for that all the time, searching for the mental comfort blanket, we probably won't find it. But actually, whilst we're busy doing that, we're not dealing with the stuff that's right in front of us. And the stuff that is in front of us is far more certain anyway. So rather than trying to predict the future, I mean, we can scenario plan to a certain extent, or we could do what Justin was talking about, with the known unknowns, and just working around how we would take on those sorts of challenges. But we can't ever create certainty. If we have, we've created an illusion of certainty, honestly. So maybe let's ditch the comfort blanket and accept what we've got in front of us, which again is coming back to reality. So I think that's why that's the third pillar. Second pillar. Vitality is the third pillar. And it's the understanding that if we don't take care of ourselves, if we don't eat properly, if we don't drink, good amounts of fresh water, if we don't get fresh air, if we don't get active and exercise, we're just going to degrade our own energy. And actually, if we're not careful, we could find that we're on a vicious downward spiral, because if we get to the end of the day and we're exhausted, so we have that extra glass of wine or whatever it is, we're not going to feel as good the day after. If we dive into the cupboard and grab sugary snacks and bits and pieces to pick our energy up, actually we're going to set off another downward spiral, because ultimately it's junk food and it's not going to lead us to feel very good. If we drink far too much coffee, don't sleep very well that night, and wake up tired the next morning and then have to have more coffee, we're on another downward spiral. So taking care of ourselves is absolutely critical, because when the energy drops, the mood goes with it, the positivity goes with it. And when we encounter a challenge, we're far less equipped to deal with it than if we maintain that vitality. And it's one thing, if we're not careful, that people might sacrifice, either because we're just not feeling great. The other thing people tend to do is opt for what makes them feel better, not what is actually good for them. I call it feeling better over being better. And if we're constantly going for what feels better, actually, we probably start one of these little downward spirals. So awareness around that, I think, is critical.
Yes, and I think we need to make sure we free up our brain power for the clever stuff, and that'll happen outside hours, hopefully, when you're out for a walk or things, and looking for opportunities. I think there's, a huge amount of self-learning out there now, and that takes a certain amount of discipline, actually. We all like the idea of it, but I mean, we've definitely seen in our business that there's an appetite for that, which is great. I mean, it's just amazing. It's, circling with your customers now, which is hugely important, whatever way you're doing it. And that is, if you keep your energy up and you keep your vitality, that's what you should be doing, because it gives you a break then from, reading social media and looking at, what's happening, which is the same news really every day at the moment, and you need to keep an eye on it. But I think that's, using your brain power now for other things is a wonderful idea.
Yeah. And it links really nicely in with the fourth pillar that I talk about, which is balance. And it's kind of work rest balance, but it's also making sure that we get play in there. And again, lots of people, when they're really, really busy, they kind of sacrifice the rest and the play bit, and it tips the balance, not necessarily in the right direction. And many people get the rest bit, they understand that, but they don't quite understand the play bit. This is, if you kind of take apart the word recreation, it's recreation. It's kind of to be renewed, to be reborn in some way. And that happens really when we play. There are all sorts of different ways of doing it. I've been talking to lots of people over the past few weeks about, for me, that means being just daft with the kids and just playing and, being a kid again. But for other people, it might be music, it might be kind of art, or it could be cooking or baking or whatever it is. But it's just, it's that ability to just be spontaneous. There's no kind of success or failure in play, because you're just playing. And we need that escapism, I think. We need to get the play bit in there as well, to come back genuinely renewed. Because, it does something to us magical on an emotional level when we play, when we just let go and have fun. And I think that's a critical part of it, as well as making sure we get the sleep, the rest, and the everything else, and that we break up our days properly, that we actually get that in our lives.
Yes, and Sonia spoke about some of this too. If you're out for a walk and you're lifting your chin, and just how you carry yourself, that also allows the energy to flow. So absolutely, that is it, fresh air, rest, all of those things help us deal with this, because this is unprecedented, and there is no rule book. There's certainly no playbook. There will be a new one and new challenges at the end of this. We know that, and we need to be ready. And I think that is not just in business, but also personally ready, I think, and look forward. Actually, this will end. The virus will go, and we've had lots of other things happen over the years, and we understand that. And people are very resilient, actually, and people are very good at adapting. As a race, we're very good at adapting, and I believe we will. And we're all in this together.
Yeah, completely, 100%. Which actually, the being in it together bit is critical for the fifth pillar, which is all about support. Making sure you've got a good team around you, making sure you've got strong relationships that you can draw on. And I think for a lot of kind of strong people, Actually, it's the ability to ask and accept help, ask for and accept help, not just be there for somebody else, but also make sure you've got people who are there for you. And be able to be vulnerable and say, listen, I'm struggling if you're struggling, or, I need a bit of a time out, a bit of time to myself or whatever, and not just taking on more and more and more burden from other people, or being the strong one. I think it's the ability to be both. The other thing that I've noticed in support that's particularly important for people is making sure that even if it might be a different routine, you've still got structure and routine. Because when that disappears, human beings tend to struggle.
Yes. Yeah, for sure. And that is more difficult now for people who are trying to homeschool and do all of these things, as we've spoken about before, and try and get some balance in that. And I think as the weeks are going in, obviously people are they're creating that balance, and they have to. But that is another struggle, I think, that we have to remember our teams and people are coming to terms with. There's a lot of hats to wear in a day for people, and you're absolutely correct. They need to step out of that sometimes, or ask for help, or not try and be the best teacher in the world and the best parent in the world. And it's okay sometimes to get it wrong.
Completely. Absolutely. And accept the support from
Yes.
others on those sorts of things, rather than just feeling like you've just got to do it.
Yes.
And I think, lots of senior leaders are they're particularly prone to this one, I'll call it, because they know that other people are relying on them and they don't want to let people down. So they take on more and more of the burden. So I think that one's critical. I mean, it links back to balance, absolutely. And so I'm a great believer that, you sometimes you need the mental filing time, you need the time on your own. Sometimes you need to talk things through with other people. You've got to create personal strategies around all of this. Know what works for you, and make sure that you get as much as possible that into the fabric of how you're living and working. The sixth one we also talked to Sonia about, which is appreciation, as I call it. Just appreciating the little things that are around you. This is for many philosophers who talk about the route to happiness. They talk about appreciation being that route to happiness. It's the joy of just truly looking at flowers and thinking, my God, they are beautiful, or a butterfly, or whatever it happens to be, or really appreciating the time that you have with the family. Don't just have the time, appreciate the time. There's I learned myself, there's that you can go for a walk and you can not notice anything. And actually, as far as you're concerned, your life experience isn't any greater for going for the walk if you've got a head full of nonsense. If you notice it, all of a sudden you're in a completely different space. Your life experience changes. If you then go a step further and appreciate it, your life experience can transform and nothing else around you has changed whatsoever. And it's tapping back into that, really understanding the joy of each moment, because it fuels us. It really does. From a mental, emotional point of view, it lifts us without having to change anything around you.
Yes.
So in my experience, building these 6 pillars, making sure we're deliberate and intentional about kind of managing and building these 6 pillars, allows us to have more positivity, mood, and energy on a regular basis, which I think puts us in far better place to take on the challenges.
We're definitely going to need.
Absolutely. Quick one before we split for this week. What over the course of the last week, from the conversations that we've had with the people that we've interviewed, have particularly struck you?
So I suppose many of our listeners, they won't have had access to, we've had a short week, so they won't have had access to some of the recordings yet. So Anne Daniels, of course, is incredible lady. And I think her message around courage, and courage to look for new opportunities, and courage to say, okay, that wasn't my plan, but this is, there's an opportunity there. I think that's an incredible. I think we also spoke to Michael Chinook, who, we kind of really looked at the fabric of a business and what are the key things that we need to concentrate, the balls that cannot be dropped now at the moment. And that, I think, will be of huge interest to people. And I think what we're trying to do is really explore all the different elements of things that really are taking up our energy at the moment. And it's hard to put everything into bite sizes. So what you will see in the next few weeks is some of our guests coming back again, because we're really only touching the surface of it. And as this continues, it's important to remind ourselves and look at that and take more advice. And that's what these guys are doing. Todd, of course, sales elevator pitch, that is really important, and networking, which is really important, because that's circling with our customers, whatever that is, helping them and staying in contact. So there's been a huge amount this week, actually. And for me, it's been, another incredible week, getting to speak to those people and reminding myself the things that are important.
Yeah, absolutely. We are really looking forward to sharing all these with you. Keep your eyes peeled, because there's some fantastic conversations, wonderful insights coming your way, and tons of inspiration. So we'll say have a fantastic weekend. Thank you very much, Helen.
Thank you.
Have a great weekend. We'll see you on another episode of Pep Talks. Take care.